And we're recording. I am here with Dr. Holly Richmond, an advisor, a friend, a client of mine who I am so inspired by in every stretch of the word. And Dr. Holly Richmond, can you just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what your top three in astrology is, please?
Absolutely. Colin, thank you so much for having me. I'm just so excited to be here today. Um, I am a somatic psychologist, licensed marriage and family therapist, and certified sex therapist. So, what do I do? That's a great question. So I see individuals and couples, non-binary individuals, mostly in virtual settings, a little bit in Manhattan in an office, working on relationship and sexuality concerns. The somatic piece of this, which I know we'll get into more, is like, how are things being expressed through the body that aren't working for you? So is it pain? Is it compulsion issues? Is it addiction issues? Like how somatically are those pain points manifesting themselves? That's always been really interesting to me.
Beautiful. And your
Yeah.
top three in astrology?
My top three: Leo rising, Aries sun, Leo moon.
Yeah, and can you position your camera to show the chart that you look? Look at
This
this.
is my printout of my notes, and then my chart is here. Yes.
I
Like
love
when I sit down every day, this is what I see, and I have my little mantras, the whole thing. Like, you changed my life, Colin. You changed my life.
Stop it, Dr. Richmond. You changed mine, and don't make me cry
Yeah.
on camera because
Oh,
bronzing moisturizer isn't waterproof, but I'll take.
right, right.
And I think the reason why I am just humbled by your work in so many stretches, but you were also so accommodating and inclusive and very thoughtful to me because I have a nervousness around approaching academics because there is this conversation that astrologers are totally woo-woo and they don't have a grip on reality. So I felt a little nervous reaching out to you to have that conversation initially, but you were so thoughtful and you were so warm, and it's just wonderful that we could have your industry and mine coming together and just seeing if there are intersections and points because we should be arguing for the same truth, even if we're using different language. And I just wanted to acknowledge how lovely you were to me from the very beginning. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I couldn't agree with you more. And you were equally as lovely. And I think our energy aligns, and we're both on a similar mission.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
mission. We are recording this on Thursday, April 23rd, and April is the national month recognized to present Sexual Assault Survivors Month. And
Right.
I'm curious, this is where I found you because when I was watching your lecture, Eros Resurrected, in Sessions 2019, hosted by Esther Perel and company, you gave an unbelievably informative presentation on ways in which sexual assault survivors can reclaim health and pleasure after the trauma and after the assault, which is what the primary material that we're going to be talking about in this video is centered on. So can you tell me a little bit on how you began researching this and why this has become a passion and interest of yours?
Yeah, so I came to the topic of my dissertation, which was the recovery of sexual health after sexual assault, because I was working at a rape crisis center, and I figured out quite early I was taught very well how to treat trauma, but I didn't know how to treat the what comes next. So I was missing the language to talk about pleasure, to talk about sexual pleasure, to talk about relationships. So I studied it, qualitative analysis, and came to three primary points that need to be addressed for really the sexual recovery, the resurrection of Eros, that life force, just the ability to want again and feel safe in wanting.
Beautiful. And
Yeah.
P.S. There is such astrological resonance with you as an Aries woman to be the person who is trying to understand this because I really do believe that Aries energy is the energy of wanting.
Mm,
What's powerful about that is Aries introduces the zodiac, right? So there's this idea that because Aries begins the zodiac, we are meant to take the energy of wanting with us throughout the rest of the chronological inquiry throughout the zodiac. It's an evolutionary progress. So without wanting, you cannot have the other zodiac signs. And Aries is the luminary to introduce that. And you are an Aries woman.
wow. Wow. Yeah, I think I said this to you when we were doing my chart. I've always felt like a non-complacent person, like it's just never enough. There's always the next thing and the next thing and then the next thing. But you helped me understand that. Like, that's part of my makeup, is to always want the next thing.
Yes, and that's your nature. And who am I
Yeah.
to you to go against your nature? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in your dissertation, and the 3 points that you have mentioned is what you discovered in the qualitative analysis, what were those points? What were those primary concerns?
Yeah, so the first is control. And this is the one that for most people feels most self-evident. Of course, survivors are going to want to feel like they are in control of the situation. And that is point A of this. But the really important part of this is relinquishing control. So
Right.
I can help survivors to feel in control, like have boundaries with the people you choose in your life, look at the situations you're putting yourself in, what kind of patterns are you repeating, all those things to make us feel in control. The real work in the control piece is can you relinquish control and still feel safe?
Ooh, ooh, oh, perfect for us to consider under the annual new moon in Taurus. Okay, do you have anything to say about that?
Um, if we can't relinquish control, we can't get to the second factor, which is
Mm.
pleasure. If we are completely locked down and in control, how are we going to let pleasure in?
Mm.
Right? Because the pleasure would feel either compulsive, addictive. Um, you know this. Like if we shut our bodies off to pain, we are also shutting our bodies off to pleasure. We don't get to discriminate about what comes in, right?
Yes, yes. I'm really moved by the resonance of this because I was just thinking about this last week for a video that I posted around the vulnerability of joy and that we cannot be, which is the work of Dr. Brene Brown.
Yes.
And we know you cannot be vigilant and vulnerable at the same time,
No.
right?
No.
Expert,
So
excellent. Okay.
yeah. So I
And
think that was the control piece of like, yes, you have to maintain control to feel safe, but how can you relinquish it? Also feel safe, but then step into pleasure.
beautiful. Okay. Do you have any more to say about that second point?
Yeah. So pleasure. This is a really interesting one as far as Eros is concerned, sexuality. Um, I like to talk about the difference between desire and arousal.
Oh,
Desire is the psychological point of wanting, arousal is the physiological embodiment of it. So, what turns us on? What turns us on and what feels good?
yeah.
Helping survivors put both of those together is incredibly empowering. I'm sure there's people listening to this right now who have like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about like really what turns me on. I just open YouPorn and I see what's there and I work with that. Or maybe I do really have a type. But how has it come to be that that is my type? What is my pattern of desire? What is my pattern of arousal? And how do those sometimes get blocked?
Patterns of, oh, I love this. Patterns of arousal and patterns of desire. Fantastic. And now, for sexual assault survivors, how would that question be a little bit more complex and a little bit different?
This is a big question. So one of the ways that I was just writing about the other day that this can show up, and this is not for everyone, so this is just one example. Say a person was sexually abused in adolescence, that abuse, bondage, being tied up, being humiliated, gets translated into their adult life where all that they can have an orgasm to is scenes of bondage. The only way they can be fully aroused is by re-engaging in the trauma. So my work is not taking that away because that's a part of their sexual template, meaning their sexual blueprint, what has made them. And
Mm,
it's an unfortunate scenario. If they want to get rid of it, I can help them with that, but that's usually like a really hard thing to do. But how do we help you choose when to pull it out of the toolbox and when to keep the lid on? Sex should be about a lot of things. It can be about bondage, it can be about romance, it can be about sensuality, it can be about role play. Like,
right.
I want people, especially survivors, to have all these things to choose from and not be like one track minded or on a one track path, because they don't feel like they're in control of that. They feel like the sex is in control of them.
Ah, right. Which is why that was the first
Right.
learning that you arrived in your
Right.
research. You have to have that control and
Control.
agency first to connect
Yeah.
to pleasure. And that's where your somatic psychology comes into place, right? Because it's all about the human body and the embodiment
Right.
practices there. Excellent.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah. And I'm trying to think of give you some other examples of how pleasure is important. I think more broadly, especially for women, we're taught so much about the don'ts of sex. Don't get pregnant. Don't be a slut. Don't
yes.
be fat. Don't make this noise. Don't smell like this. Pleasure is about our yeses. So it's like, what does feel good, right? Like, I'm gonna like put all of those things that I'm not supposed to be and not supposed to like and not supposed to want to the back burner now. Like, I'm really gonna focus on who I am in my body as a sexual being.
And I just beautifully said, and I can't confirm enough how Aries resonant this is, because Aries is all about wanting that vibrancy and that knowing of when you are saying yes to what you want, you are standing one of the highest levels of sovereignty and freedom you could possibly be in. And your sun sign, Holly, leads us to that place.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
just to connect these two concepts, I love it. Is there more you'd like to say about pleasure and your second point?
Ah, I don't think so, except it is something that I encourage everybody to explore. And for survivors, it is something that is rarely explored,
Uh,
right?
okay, yes. Is
Yeah.
that connection to the third point?
Yes, yes, and you just used the word connection. So our first point was control, maintaining and relinquishing. The second point is pleasure. The third point is connection. How do we feel connected to ourselves and then to another person while feeling safe and be able to accept pleasure,
Ooh, can you repeat
right?
the question one more time? Dr. Richmond, say it one more time for me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
How can we be connected to ourselves and our partner while feeling in control and safe and being able to accept pleasure?
Ooh,
Yeah.
another question. Okay, what do you have to say about that? I'm sure you have all the data.
Oh gosh, I don't know about that, but connection, like honestly, Colin, connection is probably the hardest thing to talk about. And
Mm,
and it's because like you can't quantify what's connection for me is going to feel different than what's connection for you. So I
mhm,
really help every person that I work with to define how they feel most connected. Do you feel most connected through your body, which means when you're exercising, when you're moving? Do you feel most connected to yourself through an art, writing, singing, dancing? Do you feel most connected when you're in the presence of other people and you're communicating? Like
mm.
what makes you feel connected? The somatic interpretation for me of connection is also integration. So
Okay.
it's an integrating of what's happening in our mind, we can experience in our body, what's happening in our body, we can experience in our mind. I'm trying to think what more to say about that integration because people usually look at me like, what exactly are you saying? It's being in the zone. I feel like integration is being in the zone without judgment.
Yes. And I think why I love our connection, to use that word,
Yeah.
is that we know that this can be both a mystical and kind of a secular feeling, right? Because
Mhm.
in the zone, an amazing Britney Spears album, by the way, and also because she's been on
Yes.
my mind all day because I've been dancing to her. Speaking of dance, but it feels both secular and mystical. It's like these are things and experiences and emotions that are really hard to define and
Yep.
understand. And I just love that we are trying to get there through the different vantage points that we have. And I'm sure, yeah, the traditional academic elite would look at that phrase and go, wait, what? But it actually makes perfect sense. And what I love about your integration aspect was that you confirmed what I think we say often around connection is it's really difficult to give what you do not have. And so if
Yeah.
you are in that space of embodiment and knowing through dance, through this system, through this strategy, when I feel connected to self, that is what gives me the license to connect and engage with you. It is the paradox. It's two sides of the same coin. So I really think it's wonderful that your research is seeking to give the language to help us know that.
Oh, thank you. And connection is also it's a language of reciprocity, right? So especially with others. So it's easiest to go there with others. Like if I'm feeling connected, I can give that to you, you can give it back to me. But
Yes.
for a lot of times survivors never got that for themselves. So I have to cultivate that language either first or in a parallel process if they're let's say that they're in a relationship. So we don't have to work on one before the other. I think you and I actually had this conversation. I'm not a believer in you have to learn how to love yourself before you learn it. You can be loved by another person. I think those can happen at the same time. I really can. I think we learn how to love ourselves sometimes when we are loved.
Oh, yes, 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 yes,
Yeah.
yes. I know we had that conversation.
Yeah.
And I did believe once that that wasn't true.
Right.
Right, I think what basis of self-love do I have other than the fact that I am loved and loving towards others? Like
Wow.
I don't know. I
Wow.
don't know. I don't, right? And so that's
Right.
why when people tell me that, I'm like, yeah, I mean, it sounds nice. It's really simplistic. And there are
Yep.
also 24 hours in a day we could do both.
Right.
Uh,
As we should.
As
As
you
we
should.
should.
No, and I just love that you have the academic support to state this. And also in astrology, it's proved there as well. Libra, as the sign of the balance scales, speaks to the fact that my autonomy, my desire, my self-love exists in beautiful equilibrium with the trust and the connection and the relational qualities that we have together. They are, as Esther says, the paradox that needs to be managed rather than the problem that needs to be solved. That is Libra. So I love that we, once again, using different language to communicate the same truth.
Right, right,
And
absolutely.
is there more to say on connection?
Gosh, I think just a little bit more on integration, which is a piece of connection. It often feels like not doing a lot at all. Integration is the non-judgment piece, especially for survivors. The thing that I'm working with most is shame. Shame is just a very elevated form of judgment, right? Why didn't I say no? I should have known better. I should have stopped this sooner. Why did I go along with that? All of those things. Connection and integration cannot be facilitated, or really they can't be experienced if we're still in that judgment mind of why didn't I. I love my work with survivors because when I do it right, they completely let themselves off the hook. They put the blame where it should be, which is on the perpetrator, not on their self, right? You did the best you could in that moment.
Right. Yes. 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 And I know
Yeah.
you do that for others. You had said in the talk that you gave at sessions that you consider a lot of your work like professionally getting people off the hook,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And getting off the hook of shame. Is there more about that, or may I ask a question about shame?
Yeah. Go ahead. Ask a question. Yeah.
So, from what I understand, there's a bit of debate in the self-conscious affect community around how shame is on the emphasis on self, guilt is the emphasis on behavior. Do you
Right.
have any thoughts or reflections about that?
I agree. I definitely agree. And a lot of times people get confused, and it's helpful when you point out, like, I think you're actually feeling guilty. I'm not sure if you're feeling ashamed about that. If you are feeling ashamed, tell me how. Tell me in what ways you're feeling ashamed about that.
Yes.
Colin, I just want your followers to know this language might sound strange. You know that I ask how questions and not why questions, because I feel like if we knew why, we wouldn't be the inquisitive creatures that we are, and we wouldn't like hit up against these stumbling blocks. So I'm constantly in this how question, the process questions, because I want to know how you got from point A to point B. You don't know why. If you don't know why, you're certainly not going to be able to tell me why as a therapist. So let's look at how this happened. And I think that how is also a piece of like letting ourselves off the hook. When we can realize that we just did the best we could to save ourselves in that moment. And for survivors, that's often inaction, right? It's the freeze response. It's not the fight or flight, because those two would have gotten us probably more hurt, more in trouble. Like that inaction, when we can say, oh, me not saying anything was taking care of myself in the best way I could at that moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, Holly. Thank you for giving that language once again, because I think what we need right now are these words, and knowing that my inaction was the best that I could for my survival, even if my shame, my fear is trying
Yes.
to convince me that it wasn't.
Right.
Yeah. Is there any more about your third point, or may I ask you more questions?
No, go for it.
Okay. So a couple of questions that I had from my readers were around knowing when it is time to disclose that you are a sexual assault survivor to partners and to others. Do you have anything to share or offer to people around knowing when it is time to disclose?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I can't give a time frame, but I can give a feeling.
Great.
So I would say generally it's not on a first date. Like it's not on that date of getting to know someone unless there is just such a profound connection and you feel safe delivering the information. The time is really when you feel solid in your recovery, and your intention in providing that information is to be seen and heard, and you are pretty darn sure the person taking in that information is not going to judge you. So know your audience, right? But also be solid in yourself, and your intention is to feel more understood and not to be taken care of.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, so being understood and not to be taken care of. Why did you make that nuance? Just out of curiosity.
It's a great question, and I want to back up a tiny bit. You can be taken care of in the moment. If you have a loving partner, if you're down the road into the relationship, that partner can support you, but they can't be the first line of support. You have to be the first line of support. Meaning, Like, let's say, Colin, I told you, yeah, I was sexually assaulted when I was 18 because I was at college and I drank so much that I passed out and I woke up and some guy was having sex with me. You want your partner to say, oh my gosh, that was horrible for you. What did you do? Were you okay? How did you take care of yourself? Instead of, God, you really shouldn't have drank so much. That was a bad call on your part.
Right, right, right,
Right?
right, right. Totally. So understood rather than being taken care of. Excellent. And
Right.
now there was a beautiful question that I had where, say you are the partner who hears as the listener that your partner is a survivor. How do they effectively demonstrate empathy in that moment?
Yeah, this is a beautiful question that I get a lot. Ask questions. Like, that's the first thing that I do. If we come at something with curiosity, we are not in judgment about it. We are not in defense about it. It's not about us. So come back with, I so appreciate that you just told me that. What can I do for you in this moment? How are you feeling? Do you need anything from me right now? You don't need to take care of this person. Like, already they're there, they're being vulnerable, they're showing up for you. They probably need a hug, they need empathy, they need compassion, all of these things, but
Yes.
they don't need really sympathy. Like, that word I struggle with a little bit because the sympathy is going to attach to the shame.
Oh, okay. So I've read a few books on sympathy, but I'm curious, why do you have an intellectual, like, no, thank you for
Yeah,
that? Go ahead.
because it's very much an I feel bad for you. And the survivor already feels bad for herself or himself, and he's working himself through that to
Right.
come to a place of empowerment instead of feeling less than and instead of feeling like I made a mistake, or the worst part of shame, I am a mistake. Like, this happened to me, and I'm going to evolve and take that experience with me and be a stronger, more compassionate, more empathetic human,
Right.
starting with myself, and then that gets directed out there. If someone keeps feeling bad for us, I just feel like it keeps us in that one down position.
Without a doubt. Right. That's what I've read on empathy too, is that
Yeah.
what we want to offer for empathy is the emotional connection with the emotion that underpins the experience. And
Right.
even if the listener was not sexually assaulted, they can connect to the emotion perhaps that the survivor is feeling around rage, betrayal,
Yeah.
shame. And
Yeah.
then empathy requires us, according to the work of Dr. Brene Brown, going back to the emotion that underpins that experience so they know they're not alone. And that equalizes us to empathy, whereas sympathy is that one up, like you said, right? Like,
Yeah.
bad for you, I don't understand.
Right.
Is
Right.
that
And it's the hierarchical higher ground. And that just is so, oh, I just kind of cringe as I think about when survivors feel that, when they've communicated to their partners and they get that, oh, I feel so bad for you. Why didn't you? Or I guess you wouldn't do that again. Or, just I've heard some horrible things. And their partners aren't saying it to be mean, but
right?
it's, and I hate to say this, if it's the survivor is a woman and the partner is a male, the male immediately goes into how I can fix this.
Right.
Right. And that's 100% not what a survivor of any gender needs. It's just, how can I be with you in this moment?
Beautiful. As you said, coming with that questions of how. Yeah,
Right.
it's all about that language. I'm so glad you brought that up. Now, something is telling me to ask you rather provocatively that, say the listener is also a survivor.
Mhm.
Do they then disclose me too?
Mhm. No, they don't have to, because where are they in their process? First of all, I want them to know if they're being triggered by the information they're hearing. That's
Mhm.
step one, right? And if you are, how can you communicate that and feel safe? And if you don't want to disclose, you really can't. So you have to graciously somehow
Yeah.
back yourself out of that conversation. But if you're triggered, the person telling you is going to see that you are not there anymore, right? Because if you're triggered, you're going into full anxiety. You're having an out of body experience.
Yeah.
So he or she is going to notice that. So how can you just gently say, gosh, I'm feeling anxious right now. If you say you're feeling triggered, the person is probably going to know that you are a survivor as well. If you're
Right.
not ready to disclose that, like, that's a tricky situation. Colin, that's a really wonderful question. I think it would be, I am feeling so anxious right now. I don't feel like I'm in a great place to hear this, and I want to support you. How can I help support you when I'm trying to take care of myself right now? I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm so glad you brought that up in terms of like, I'm feeling anxious and I want to support you. I don't have the capacity for both in this moment. Many years ago, I read a Facebook post by Dr. Harriet Lerner. Are you aware?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Yeah. She's a
wonderful work.
legend in your field, right? And I love when she said that so often when people tell us these stories and reflections, we sometimes in the best effort to help will then say, me too, I know exactly what you feel. And then we try to connect in that moment. And then she said in the Facebook status, and I just it has lived in my bones ever since, off you go with a story of your own,
Yep,
and then the speaker feels abandoned because
right.
now you brought it back to you.
Yep,
And in the best effort to help, it might just not be that time.
right,
And
right.
I always felt that may be the way to go. So I'm glad you were saying, like, well, if you want to ask yourself, where are you in your healing process? Where is your triggers, right? And so maybe it's just to let the survivor speak in that experience. And then when it's your time, you'll know it.
Yeah. And I've seen some beautiful moments where it has been a Me Too moment,
Oh,
but please let the teller tell their full story and ask questions about them. And then maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes into the conversation, then you bring up, I had that experience too.
yeah,
Rather than the survivor discloses, this happened to me, and you immediately go, oh my gosh, that happened to me too.
right.
Right? So you take their story. So you accept their story, listen to their story, ask questions, ask how you can help them. And then if it feels like the right moment, and trust yourself here, trust your gut, trust your intuition, then say, I had something similar happen to me.
Yeah, right, right, right. And you love a doctor when they say trust your intuition. Can I just tell you again?
It's
And
my greatest tool
truly, right.
on my whole education.
Yes, 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 yes. And I love that you, as an academic, are saying that. Like, it's just, I love that tension that you occupy. So thank you. And now, related to people who are clinicians, astrologers, psychics, healers, any kind of practitioner in the industry of personal growth, and their client discloses, I'm a survivor, this is where I'm at in my healing process. What recommendations would you have for them to effectively hold the space of that story and provide them with the effective resources for help?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question too, because it can be hard for anybody to hear this, right? So again, how are you feeling in the moment? Colin, if someone tells you, how are you feeling? Like what's happening to you if you're having a very like if your tank is full and you're having a good day, you can probably take this information in and be right there and support them. If your tank is empty, how are you taking care of yourself? So
Yeah,
the compassion fatigue is the real deal. So really know that, and acknowledge it for yourself. If you can contain the conversation with your client in a way that it still feels professional, I think that's the best thing to do. But
right.
as far as resources, help excavate where they are in their healing process. Do they need a therapist? Do they need a support group? Is there violence in their relationship now? Like safety is always our foremost concern, but kind of figure out what's happening where they are. Point them. Psychology Today, I think, is a great search engine for just finding a therapist that's going to be trauma focused.
Right.
ASECT is a great aasect.org is a great website and resource for finding sex therapists. So I just want to give a little bit of a spiel on this.
Please.
Yeah. A sex therapist is almost 100% going to come at a sexual problem from a sex positive perspective.
Okay.
And when I say sex positivity, that is all sex is good sex as it's consensual and pleasurable. All sex is good sex as long as it's consensual and pleasurable. Whereas a therapist without sexuality training, if you come in with a fetish, so many rape survivors have rape fantasies, right? So that's part of their sexual repertoire, their desire mode. They have rape fantasies. If you tell this to a therapist who is not trained in sexuality, she is going to freak out that you're having rape fantasies. Whereas she should just be like, okay, that's happening from a non-judgmental approach. You're not hurting anyone with this fantasy. You're not being hurt. Let's just pull this apart and see where you are. Or if a survivor has a fetish that seems a little odd to someone, like a sex therapist is just not going to find almost anything you say in human sexuality odd because it's all normal, to be
Right.
honest.
Right. That's why we love you because you
Right.
eyelash. Okay.
Yeah.
So So a survivor should look for a clinician who has this interest, who has this training and field of research already within their practice, is
Yeah.
your encouragement.
And if they're trauma focused, all the better. Yeah. So what I'm the ideal person is trauma focused, sex positive lens.
Excellent, excellent. And they can find all those psychologists in the websites that you just provided.
Yeah. And then RAIN, RAINN, is the next organization. Every kind of statistic resource. They're a national network that can link you up with support groups and also, I believe, therapists on their website in your area specifically.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Okay.
Yeah.
So, to the question of how do clinicians, coaches, and healers bear the weight of the story, and you said what you're going to want to do is kind of mine where they're at in their healing process.
Mm-hmm.
What should they be paying attention to determine that level? Because I don't have the wonderful education that you have, so I would want to know what I'm looking for, other than, so obviously you mentioned safety is a big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not violence is ongoing. Are there
Right.
any words or things that I should pay attention to in those conversations that I may have with survivors?
Absolutely. The first thing I encourage people to look for is somatic cues. So, Colin, I know you and I work mostly virtually. You can still get an incredible amount of somatic cues through Skype, through FaceTime, through Zoom. Like, watch, if they stop making eye contact with you, they are still very much in shame about what they're telling you.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
If they're looking up and they're just not ready to meet your eyes, like I feel like eyes are where empathy is communicated. If they're not ready to give that to themselves, they're certainly not going to be able to look at you when they're telling you. If they're watch for dissociation. So if you feel like they are telling you this horrific story and there is no affect attached to it, if they're just telling a story like they're going to the grocery store, the story of when they were sexually abused as a child, I would think they were in the early part of their healing process. So I would recommend like finding a therapist, maybe even emailing them the resources, because it can be anxiety provoking for a survivor who is just getting into their healing process to really find out, oh my gosh, where do I go? I don't even know where to look. I don't know where to start.
Let's provide it. Oh, and now by affect, that's just the emotional recognition, as you were saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So see if they have, so disassociation, excellent. And the somatic cues. Yeah, because when we met in the city, our conversation encouraged me to make sure that more of my sessions and readings are video.
Mm-hmm.
I did not even think of that. So,
Yes.
okay, so somatic cues and disassociation. And now, how do we track elevated progress in the healing journey?
Mm-hmm. So you're going to notice that the person themselves is pretty dialed in. Like that foundation is fairly solid. Then what you might hear is my relationship. Like, I cannot get a relationship to work. This is the point where it keeps breaking down.
Ooh, okay, okay. So when they're speaking about their current relational scenarios, okay,
Right.
excellent.
Right. And usually there's some sexual piece of that. So we were just so on different pages sexually, or if they haven't really done their work around their trauma, they'll start to have flashbacks. They'll start to get triggered by their partner's touch, and they come to me feeling so frustrated with themselves. I know this is a good guy. I chose this person. I love him. I cannot stand for him to touch me anymore.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Right. And then you, as a clinician, have the capability to work with them somatically, psychologically, et cetera, to help with that.
Yeah. But I think, again, those three websites that I told you, Psychology Today, RAIN, and what was the other one I mentioned? Oh, no.
That's okay. It's recorded.
It's recorded. I'm losing my mind right now. It'll come back to me in a second. But yeah.
But I love that you also just kind of inspired us to
ASECT, sorry.
You got it. I knew you would. Okay. You inspired us as practitioners in the field to just have those resources already, because I have them for, children of alcoholics. I have them for other recovery systems. I did not even know that these services were available. So I think really the universal suggestion that you would have then is just have these resources ready to go. And then when you are hearing that the survivor is sharing this information, you can just email it to them separately or say, I have this list. Would you like it? Right.
Yeah.
Just to have that level of readiness and preparation is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because people don't come to us because everything's going well. So we got to make sure we have these resources and material ready to go.
Right. And I'm sure there are some people listening right now who are like, I could probably do really well at that work and supporting one of my clients through that process, be a support system. And there are other people listening who are like, that is so out of my wheelhouse. I don't know anything about sexual trauma, and I'm going to need to refer out on this. That is the mark of a good clinician, knowing what you need to refer out on.
100%, right? Because this is not my educational wheelhouse, which is
Right.
I'm like, well, let me tell you who I need to introduce you to, right?
Right.
And happy to suggest them to everything that you offer to your clients. Yeah,
Right.
this is great.
And we had this conversation, Colin. Me trying to read a chart like that would just be a shit show, right? Like,
I
this is
know.
really pretty over here.
I know. I know. One of these days, when the physical distancing is lifted and we can have cookies and just talk
Yes.
about the city, because that's the day, I'm going to
Yep.
record you just ad-libbing an astrology
Sure,
reading.
sure. Yeah.
I know. I cannot wait. I'm like, okay, Leo rising, go. And I'm just record it. No, I know, because you'll figure it out one day. But yes, it's all about
Yeah.
the referral. That's absolutely true. Thank you. And
Yeah.
to the point of other material, I'm curious because most of my readers are queer, progressive,
Yep.
and trying to figure out how there is research that reflects their experience. Do you have any outside theories, studies, clinicians, or researchers who are looking at perhaps sexual assault within queer communities, or any statistics and vocabulary to offer if they are of that experience?
Oh my gosh, yes. And you're right. And I just want to say this out loud. Queer and non-binary identifying individuals, gay individuals, lesbians, their rate of sexual assault, sexual abuse is higher than the straight population. So I just want everyone to hear that. Not enough research has been done, and there are some great people out there doing the work. Okay, so this is where, again, I'm going to say about AASECT. AASECT, the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists.org. You
Yeah.
are going to find so many like research materials. There are people who are doing the research on queer communities. There's a lot there. This is going to be like your portal to finding those links.
Wonderful. So it's all located within
Right there.
database. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. And now, if you are watching this video and a survivor and not sure where you're at in the healing process, what would be your first suggestion to them? What would be your first step towards them in actively reclaiming their pleasure and getting to Eros Resurrected?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are some good books out there. There's some Stacey Haynes, Sexual Healing. I still recommend a lot. Some videos to watch. I think the Me Too movement has given us all permission to really feel what we're feeling. 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, I think when we said sexual assault, we went to this visual of a violent situation. That is not sexual assault. Sexual assault doesn't have to be violent at all. It just needs to be non-consensual. So I think the first step is not to stop minimizing and own this happened to me and I am not to blame for this. So again, putting the blame where it belongs, taking ourselves off the hook. And then I'm going to get some resources up on my website, but again, that control, pleasure, and connection as we've worked through. But there will be some online resources there. You can come to my website. We'll talk about that at the end. But it's really like thinking about those things for yourself. How do I maintain control? How do I relinquish control? In what way do I experience pleasure? What do I want and what turns me on? And then how do I really feel connected to myself and to others?
Beautiful. That's it. And then they can ask themselves those deeper questions and then live into the answer as best as they can.
Yes. Yes.
Beautiful. Okay.
Yeah. Well
And
said.
speaking of books, Dr. Holly Richmond, don't
Oh,
you have some amazing news to share?
I do. I
Yes.
do. I just signed a deal with New Harbinger Press out of San Francisco to put a book together on exactly the things that we are talking about. Yeah, I feel like a lot of the books out there, the one that I mentioned, Sexual Healing, it's really geared towards people who have experienced sexual abuse, which is most likely childhood sexual abuse. The work I do with survivors it's usually adults. And
Mhm.
it's the people who minimize their experience. So the person who was date raped, the person who was drunk and passed out and was assaulted, but was just like, oh shit, that happens to everyone. I'm not going to worry about it. yes, you are going to worry about it, because if you don't worry about it, then there's going to be a somatic cue, a relational cue, something that comes up in the future that's going to force you to really take a look at this. So I'm writing this for the survivors who have really minimized their experience and can't do that anymore for whatever the reason might be. So the good news is the book is coming. The bad news is you're going to have to wait about a year to get
Yeah, that's okay. At least
it.
it's done. And I guess the good news is you are among the only people who are speaking on this topic specifically. Way to go, Aries Sun.
Oh,
That's right. I know. I always say it. Mariah Carey, Lady Gaga, Aretha Franklin, Diana Ross, Gloria Steinem, Celine Dion. These are powerhouse Aries women that are really charting uncharted territory. And I just love that you are honoring the best of your astrology by pursuing this conversation independently and for the first time, so other people don't have to do it because you're championing the way.
I do. It's just, it's not enough to survive, right? I want to help you thrive. Like, I want to help you have great sex again. I want to help you feel connected again. Like, all of those pleasure points that the world offers, you deserve all of that. So
Yeah.
really, and it's just surviving's not enough.
No, it's not. And in the 5 minutes we have left, what I think could be really helpful, because in your Eros Resurrected talk, I love that you were very semantic. You were like, here's the vocabulary to help, which we
Mm-hmm.
can talk about. We could also, in the 5 minutes we have, maybe have you fact check some common mythologies and maybe introduce a
Sure.
truism instead. Do you want to? It's your.
Yeah. No, you point me in the direction where you feel like your listeners are gonna get the most benefit.
I think, my listeners are semantic. So can we
Oh
go with
yeah.
vocabulary if you wouldn't?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
yes, take us to.
Absolutely.
Well,
And
go
I
ahead.
don't have my PowerPoint in front of me, so this is like literally off the
Uh,
top of my head. If we're talking about sexual abuse that is under the age of consent, or a person who cannot give consent because of a psychological or physiological reason. So if someone says they were abused, this is usually under the age of 18. Consent differs in different states and different countries, but that's generally what we were talking about.
okay.
Sexual assault is really a fairly all-inclusive term. It is unwanted touch, attention. Sexual assault can also be being sexually harassed electronically, so being sent pictures, revenge porn, but it's generally like that date rape category, any kind of unwanted touch whatsoever. How it's different from rape. If we say the word rape, we are always talking about penetration of the genitals.
Okay.
So if you're going to use the word rape, then there was a penetration of the genitals where that's what the experience was. Some people use the term sexual assault as inclusive of rape, and that is absolutely fine, because rape, let's be honest right now, that is a hard word to say. For a lot of people, I know my clients are like, it just feels better for me to say I was sexually assaulted rather than I was raped. That's okay. And again, though, I think we have this idea in our head that rape is violent. And I'm not saying a date rape wasn't violent. It might have been, or it might not have been, right? But it was still rape.
Mm,
So, but you use the words that feel best to you.
gorgeous. Right.
Yeah.
Or your somatic point of view. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sexual harassment, that is, it's got Me Too written all over it. When we're talking about sexual harassment, this is usually some kind of power dynamic at play, right? A person is trying to control another person through sexual innuendo, threatening to take their job away. There's something where the person, the harasser, is in more control of the situation or has more power than the person being harassed.
Okay. Okay. So excellent. Are there any
Yeah.
other words that you think are essential? I know we could go on and on.
Yeah, I'm trying to think anything else. Oh, can we talk about survivor and victim?
Of
I
course.
think those are like my two favorite words. So you will never hear me say the word victim unless I'm talking about a victim mindset. To me, every person who has experienced sexual assault, any kind of sexual trauma, is a survivor. If they are a victim, they are no longer with us. That's how I was trained. Anybody sitting in front of me is a survivor. And the reason for that is because words inform our experience. If I sit down with you and I say, Colin, oh, so you're a victim of sexual assault, I'm so sorry. And then I go into, well, for victims, they'll often feel this way. And oh my gosh, Colin, what you just said, that's such a victim thing. Like, you're going to internalize that language and feel like a victim, which is disempowered. where I say you're a survivor of sexual assault and what you're feeling is completely normal. And so many survivors have felt this. You have that sense of optimism, that sense of hope of knowing again that you've done the best you could with the tools you had. A victim sits firmly in, this is the worst thing ever. No one could possibly understand this, to where the survivor sits in, usually, it wasn't that bad. Why can't I get over this? Right? Right. So most of the people I sit down in front of, a survivor is going to be like, this happened and gosh, I really didn't think it was that bad. And it was 10 years ago, but now I'm experiencing A, B, C, and D. And I think my sexual assault might have had something to do with it.
Excellently articulated. And I love that you're making the distinctions and these differentiations accessible and understandable. So thank you.
Yeah.
My follow-up question would be, so if the survivor is saying like, this wasn't that bad, why can't I get over it? Where would you want to see the thriver be? Where would they be sitting on?
Yeah. She's going to say, this was bad and I survived. And now I'm incorporating pleasure into my life. I have a healthy relationship. I know what I want. I'm not judging myself for this. I'm not minimizing it anymore. It was horrible. Like, right? It was horrible. And look at me. Look at how well I've done. I've come to this. I'm going to take this experience and integrate it for myself. I'm going to walk through the world strong and empowered. And this is just my little hook. And if I can help another survivor feel strong and empowered, I'm going to be a model for that. Right? It's like hand it down, hand it down, hand it down, hand it down. Like that's the way we're going to solve this problem.
Yes, yes. Holly, when I saw you for the first time, I just had this flash of destiny and I was like, we're going to work together. I love her. She's going to provide an enormous amount of wisdom and help to me and others. And every single interaction that we've had together, you have exceeded to all of the expectations that I felt the minute I saw you speak at sessions. I mean, truly, you were captivating. And when someone is in their purpose the way that you are, it is that handing it down, right? It is just like, this is where I have my meaning and this is where I have my contribution. And I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing and the influence that you're providing and the meaning, the intelligence, the way showing. Words couldn't even possibly do justice to wrap language around the emotion that you help others feel. And I'm just so grateful for you. So thank you, thank you, thank you for spending this time with me. You are a luminary, and I cannot wait to buy your book and continue telling everybody how much I love you, because you have been amazing to me from start to finish, and I'm just so grateful.
Oh, Colin, I'm taking that in and I'm saying thank you. And it is coming right back at you. I just feel I love your voice and your expression, and you've taught me a lot already. So being bigger in my presentation, but you're right. This lives in my heart, and it's work that I love.
It does. And it's the Leo part, right? You got that Leo moon, all about courage to bring in. And your sun is in the 10th house. And for the astrologers who are watching, you cannot help but present this work on a huge stage. It is of service because it is of value, because it has meaning and depth. That's exactly how the universe operates. And you will be lifted to the absolute highest. And you have me and so many other people taking you there and supporting you there and making sure that you continue doing the work that you're doing. So we're so thankful.
Oh, thank you. Hugging you.
Both are rising too. So we're just like, you're great, you're great, you're great, you're great. Giving you all the hug and all the cookies.
Yes, all the cookies I can eat.
I know. Reading that we just have a serious cookie fetish. It's a
bad one. No judgment. No judgment.
No judgment. Okay, but like the EL fudges, the Keebler ones, like not the highbrow ones.
No. Like whatever you can get from 7-Eleven or the Wawa. Yes.
7-Eleven. Oh, you speak my language. Oh my God, I love you. Okay. And just once again, thank you, thank you, thank you. I know you have a consultation very soon, so I will not keep you anymore. And where can everyone find you?
Thank you. Yeah. So drhollyrichmond.com, drhollyrichmond.com, and then on all the social media platforms, Dr. Holly Richmond, no punctuation.
Excellent. Yep. You're still accepting clients, and you have.
If you go to my website, there's get a consultation link, and that will come straight to my inbox, and I'll email you back within 24 hours.
Yes, you will, because that's Aries speed. Yes. And speaking of Aries speed, I will let you go. Thank you for everything. Wishing you everything always.
Thank you, Colin. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
Bye.